and welcome to this week's Used Car Heaven, where you join me in the wilds of some exotic country, where this week we're on the trail of one of those beasts of the motoring jungle. And I'm being very quiet because I think we've spotted one through the undergrowth over there. In the motoring jungle, it's said that these cars are very hard to find, but we think we have located the perfect one on Used Car Heaven, and it's a VW Passat. Now, I know that the Passat may be a slightly boring car, or be perceived as being one at least, but it's not, because it offers solid reliability, fantastic build quality, and quite reasonable prices now that these cars are getting that little bit older. When this was new, it cost £17,000, a 1.6 SE, but now it could be yours for less than £7,500. And inside you find all the same switches and controls as you'd find on, say, an Audi A4. The switches for the windows, the door handles, the mirrors. The gate around the automatic gearbox is the same as you find on an Audi A8. It's the VW parts bin raid, and you'd find that on anything from a Passat to a Seat or a Skoda. Volkswagen brought great executive image to the mainstream car market when they launched these latest Passats in 1997. Here was a car that would compete against the likes of the Ford Mondeo and the Vauxhall Vectra, but really those sort of cars are like chalk and cheese compared to these Passats. Again, like the Golf, you've got fantastic build quality, a superb interior, very, very comfortable and refined, and at cruising speeds, very quiet. The Passat range has had a recent facelift, which has affected values of cars like this, although only marginally. This R-Edge 1.6 SE Auto, when it was new, cost nearly £18,000, but now after 3 or so years later, it's still retaining around 40% of its original value, which is very good in these, fairly harsh economic times, certainly as far as motor dealers are concerned, and way better than its competitors. This 1.6 engine only produces 101 brake horsepower, so it's a little on the slack side, to be honest. Linked with the automatic gearbox, it's not fantastic on the road as a driver's car. This 1.6, although not particularly quick, is very economical. It will do late 30s to the gallon as an average. However, if you want fantastic fuel economy in the Passat range, you have to go for one of the diesel engines. The 110 brake horsepower 1.9 turbo diesel will get you mid-50s to the gallon as an average. So if you do a lot of mileage, it's well worth looking for a car like that. Other engines in the Passat range, apart from the 1.6, you've got a 1.8, a 1.8 turbo, a 2.3 V5, and the 2.8 V6 producing 174 brake horsepower. The Passat, whilst not being a car to set the world on fire, is honest, reliable and solid, a true executive feel to it, more so than rivals like the Mondeo and the Vectra. The most recent facelift of the Passat means that early models like our test car are getting cheaper. They're well worth a look. So, if you fancy a quality executive saloon, look no further than the VW Passat. Coming soon, we'll be testing the VW Golf GTI, but first, here's Richard Hammond.
So you think you've found your car, you've given it a thorough going over, we've learnt our lessons in recent weeks, and you reckon it could be the one for you. It's time for the test drive, but before we move away, one check to make. Do be sure you're insured. Either yours or the owner's insurance has got to cover you for the day. And then we can take to the road. Well, actually, before we even take off, there's a lot we can learn about the car. For a start, starting. Does it start quickly and cleanly? Yeah, it does. If it takes ages and the battery's grinding away trying to start it, it could be the battery, it could be the starter, it could be expensive, so be careful. Make sure as well that your oil pressure light goes out like that. If it hangs around for ages, could be bad news, could be expensive. Snick it into first gear. It should go in quickly, crisply and cleanly. Even if the gearbox is cold, it shouldn't take too long. Get ready with the clutch. It should bite nice and early. If it takes ages and ages, you could have a shock clutch, and that could be expensive as well. With all of that checked out, things are looking good. It's time to take to the road, finally. Use your ears all the time. Listen out for rattles and squeaks and clunks. If they come from the rear of the car, well, it could be the rear shocks that have gone. If it's the front, it could be the suspension struts, could be all sorts of things. One thing it could be is an indication of huge mileage. So you want to think twice. Use your mirror, and not just for checking what's going on behind you, though obviously you should. Keep an eye out for smoke through the rear window. If you see a blue haze, bad news. Engine's kaputski, I'm afraid. If you see what looks like steam, well, it's steam, particularly if you've run the engine from coal. It's just condensation, don't worry. If you see black smoke, well, again, don't actually panic. It probably just means the engine's running a bit rich. Then, using your mirror, when you're sure there's nothing behind you and it's perfectly safe, do this. Time to anchor up as hard as you can, safely. What we're looking for here, obviously, is the brakes should stop the car, but also they shouldn't pull in either direction, because if they do, that could indicate all sorts of problems. Back to it. When you reckon it's safe, try taking both hands off the wheel just briefly to see if it tracks true and straight. If not, well, it could be twists in the suspension, it could be badly set up, it could be the steering rack, it could be that the whole chassis is twisted after a nasty accident, and that's bad. At some point, either at the beginning or end of your test drive, make sure you move the steering wheel from lock to lock, because if there's power-assisted steering and there's any groaning or shuddering, it can be very expensive getting things fixed down there. And finally, just mess around, flick every switch, pull every lever, make sure all those electrical systems work. A blown indicator bulb might not be expensive, but it's a pain. Get it fixed before you buy. And if it all checks out, it's off to the bank.
So, have you ever fancied owning the ultimate hot hatchback, the Golf GTI? Well, if you have, now is the ideal time to buy one. Prices are getting cheaper. Plus, the Golf has grown up a bit. Gone are the raw days of the Mark I GTIs from the late 1970s. These days, the Golfs have got chunky, they've got grown up, they've got heavier, and they've got turbocharged. And a car like this, which was £18,000 when it was new, could be yours for as little as 11.5. The Golf, and in particular the VW Golf GTI, is an icon. There's absolutely no doubt about it. And you can't honestly see the day when VW announce that they're going to scrap the Golf completely and they will no longer make it and replace it with something completely different. Surely that isn't going to happen. The Golf has been around for such a long time, since the Mark I Golfs of the late 1970s right the way through to these cars, which are the Mark IV Golfs. These came out in 1997 and offer class-leading build quality and reliability. And inside the Golf, it's everything you would want a car to be. Plus, these GTI models get fantastic Recaro seats in the front. So if you want a GTI, there are two to choose from in the latest range. There's a 125 brake horsepower car or this 150 brake horsepower turbo. 0 to 60 in this car is about 8 seconds, about 10 seconds to 60 in the slow model. Top speed in this is about 140 miles an hour. Golf GTIs can be very cheap. You can find early ones at less than £1,000, but like most things, it's worth paying as much as you can afford to get a really nice one. If you think that 11.5 grand is too much for a car like this, you could find a turbo as cheap as £9,500 or a non-turbo as cheap as about £8,500. These are not terribly complicated cars to look after, but they are reliable. The Golf is still the hatchback that people aspire to owning. Superb quality is still paramount, although the Golf has put on a bit of weight over the years. The latest GTI models aren't quite as fast as they were, but still heaps of fun and very safe. The Golf GTI is still a supercar to drive, and in turbo form, great fun too. That's all for part 1 of Used Car Heaven. There'll be lots more in part 2. Hello and welcome back to part 2 of Used Car Heaven, and in this part of the programme, 2 warm hatchbacks. That was the Peugeot 206 GTI, and this is the Fiesta Zetec S. The phrase hot hatchback has been thrown around and aimed at all sorts of cars over the years, many of which didn't deserve that title, but the likes of the Golf GTI, the Peugeot 205 GTI, the Escort XR3 and the Fiesta XR2 did. And with this latest Zetec S from Ford, you get a car that's got the extra treatment. At the rear, you've got the spoiler and the extra sill, you've got the alloy wheels, and at the front you get the mesh grille and the fog lamps. So, if a Fiesta Zetec S is on your shopping list at the moment, how much do you have to pay to get a good one? Well, they've been on the market for about 18 months, but forget about paying 11 grand for a new one. Instead, pay as little as £8,000 for a car like this. The wait to get the Fiesta absolutely spot on was certainly worth it. These revised Fiestas came along in 1999 and have made this car into a real good driver's car. It's fun on the road. And we've had to wait a long time to get any sort of performance Fiesta. Remember, back in the 80s and early 90s, we had the likes of the XR2 and the RS and the turbo models, but nothing since. It's been a long wait to get the Fiesta Zetec S, and it's worth it. The ride, the handling, the control in this car are all superb. Mind you, you get that right the way through the Fiesta range, not just in the Zetec S. Even a 1.25 Zetec can be fun to drive. So when this car was new, it would have cost somewhere about £11,000 or so. This has only done 6,000 miles, but it could be yours for as little as 8 grand. You won't find many cheaper Zetec S's than this, and the good news is it's only insurance Group 8. With the all-new Fiesta out soon, the Zetec S was a final fling from Ford to see the car through to 2002. Having spent some time in the latest Fiesta, it is a class act. Handling is sharp, even though the Zetec S is not the most powerful of the small hot hatches. Bit of a shame, really. Emergency stop! Must be time for the car doctor.
Right, I've got a customer here that's brought his car in because his brakes aren't working as well as they normally do. Now, I've already taken the wheel off to have a look at them, and I can immediately see that we've got a big problem here. And just to show you, it's quite badly worn, but also it's very, very rusty, because here is a new brake disc, and you can see the old one here is basically all falling to bits. And so what we're going to do is we're going to replace this brake disc and the brake pads, which are equally as worn, and hopefully we're going to successfully fit some new parts. Now, the first part of the job is actually to get it in position, and then also, as with any brakes, there's a lot of dust and dirt connected with them, and they can contain asbestos, so we want to arrest that dust by giving it a good washing off with brake cleaner. So we get it in the position, and then we've got to give it a good wash off so that any airborne dust will be collected and arrested, and will just run down onto the paper that I've put already onto the job. So it's nice and clean, and it can be thrown in the bin rather than me breathing all the dangerous dust. The next stage is to basically get stuck in and strip it apart, and we can see then in greater detail what we've got to work with. So I'm going to first of all take out this caliper bolt here so we can reveal the brake pads. So I'll get this apart. and that's the brake caliper, which we'll pop to one side for now. We can take the brake pads out, and you can see here when I compare it with a new one that they're actually very, very badly worn, in that that's the thickness of a new one. You can see that the thickness of that lining is very, very badly worn, so they definitely need changing. What I'm going to do now is remove the caliper carrier, and then that'll enable us to take off the brake disc. So I'm going to use air tools just to speed the job up, but they're not essential for the job at all. So I'll get stuck in here now. So that's nicely out of the way now, and we can now see we've got a couple of retaining bolts here just to take the old brake disc off. Now this is going quite well actually, but it doesn't always go quite as good as this. And you can see again when I compare the two brake discs that that's clearly in good condition. That's clearly ready for the scrapyard. There's no real maintenance to do at this stage. It's basically just a case of building it back up now with the new parts, certainly with the brake disc. So we're going to put the locating pins in. We've got a bit of treatment to do to the new brake pads before we fit them. So turn it back round. And this can sometimes be a bit of a tricky part, fitting the caliper carrier back on, because it's buried behind the hub and you can't always see what you're doing. So see how we go with that. And what I like to do is get all the bolts started first before I tighten them all up, just in case you have any trouble fitting them. Now then, that's all in place now. What we've got to do now is fit the new brake pads, and if you are not that well versed in doing these jobs, you might be inclined just to fit the new pads straight in. But what we're going to do is just lubricate the edges with some special copper grease, which stops them from getting noisy and also stops them from seizing up. So we get more life out of the brake pads. So it's a case of popping in that one there. Exactly the same on the other side, and this is, you can't use normal grease on this. It's a very high melting point and it is only used on brake pads, so make sure you get a small tube of that if you're having a go yourself. Finally, we've just got to push back this caliper piston here with, I use a large pair of pliers, but you can use a G-clamp or anything like this, and this just pushes the piston back to allow us to fit the new thickness of linings into the braking system. So now we can just pop that back into place, pop our bolts in, and one at the bottom as well. Right, now all we've got to do is make sure all the bolts are tightened up, repeat the job on the other side of the car and pop the wheel on. But remember, before you drive off the ramp or off your driveway, make sure you pump the brake pedal up so you've got a brake, some brakes working, and make sure that you're careful for the first 10 miles of driving until the brakes are bedded in.
So, we like the Fiesta Zetec S, but what about the Peugeot 206 GTI? Well, outside it looks rather dull. It looks like any other ordinary 206, to be honest, but it gets more power and a bigger engine. Plus, inside the cabin is a far more pleasant place to be than in the Fiesta, and you get some nice quality touches as well. Things like the drilled aluminium pedals and gear lever, very nice sport seats covered in leather and Alcantara. It's fantastic build quality, and it's altogether a nicer place to be. Now, all the Peugeot GTI models have had a long and glorious past, right the way back to probably the hot hatchback, the 205 GTI, in the mid-1980s. So, is this 206 GTI a worthy successor? Well, I think it's unfair to compare the 205 and the 206 as GTIs. I mean, let's face it, the cars were built some 15 years apart. Times change, technology moves on. I mean, this is probably a far more comfortable and easier car to drive and more forgiving than the 205 ever was. And everybody used to rave about the 205. The World and his wife used to own one. It was always slightly on the expensive side, as the 206 is. You immediately notice the difference between this and the Fiesta when you step inside the cabin. It is a better place to be, as I've already mentioned, but it's more roomy and the engine feels more willing and eager. Sure, it's got more power and it's a bigger engine, but you get the feeling that this is a car to really rev hard down your favourite country lanes. There's no doubting that the 206 GTI is quick, and I love the sound of the engine. It sounds like it's been tuned slightly to give it a nice raspy sound, which works best when you rev it really, really hard. So we've got a 2-litre engine in these cars, producing around about 135 brake horsepower, and that's good enough to get you from 0 to 60 in 8 seconds, way quicker than the Fiesta, and onto a top speed of 130 miles an hour. The steering is very sharp on the GTI models, plus the slick 5-speed gearbox is a lot easier to use than you'll find in the Zetec S. Although the Peugeot's got more power than the Fiesta, it seems to lack a little of the fun that the Zetec S has. Maybe that's because this is a little bit bigger car. What about prices for these now? Well, £14,000 new, but buy a 20,000 mile example like this and it could be on your driveway for as little as £9,000, which sounds pretty cheap.
Ever since the original 205 GTI, Peugeot have produced some cracking performance cars. The latest 206 GTI may not be as potent as previous models, but it's fast and fun all the same. More expensive to buy new than the Fiesta? Look for an early model like our test car, yours for £9,000.
Peugeot have always been on a hiding to nothing trying to replace the 205 with this 206, but they've done a pretty good job. So, which would I choose between this or the Fiesta? Well, for its extra grunt and performance, it has to be the Peugeot 206 GTI. That's it for this week's Used Car Heaven. Join us for a special final episode next week.